This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is our 2019 CISA Book Club. For those of you who are new to us, we did this once before with the CISSP, and I actually participated in that a few years back, and I was able to pass it, so that was great. And thanks to Sherry for doing all the heavy lifting on putting this slide deck together. This is great. First of all, this book club we're primarily focused on, passing the test here. There's a kind of a difference between practical knowledge and test knowledge. And for those of you who have taken these kind of standardized tests before, I think you'll understand that. Sometimes your experience can get in the way, but you want to make sure you think of this through the eyes of ISACA as opposed to your own experiences, because sometimes that can influence you in the wrong way. But I think everyone who has already gone through the CISSP or any other InfoSec test, plus anybody who's got, who's a QSA, that PSI framework, there's a lot of alignment there, and I think that is a huge. Everyone on the call is probably already a big advantage already on this test. Let's see. So why don't we get started?
I want to add this too, just to give everyone a little bit of background. So, Joel Clark has been in the IT arena for many, many moons. He's quasi-recent to the security world. Must have been about 3 years ago you got your CISSP. And,
right.
And then this past summer, while Clark had tons of plates spinning while he was delivering PCI assessments and risk assessments and was pretty much fully booked, he somehow found the free time to basically self-study and then sit for and pass the CISA exam. So I thought he'd be a great inspiration to us all to help lead these calls. But we didn't want to just saddle Clark with saying, all right, well, you have to lead every one of these book club meetings. So that won't be our intent here, but it's awesome to have you kick it off, Clark. But we have a few other CISAs within the practice as well. So in addition to us leading some of these discussions, on occasion, we'll also bring in some guest speakers here and there to talk about real life related examples and experiences pertaining to any of the subject matter we happen to be discussing that week.
Yeah, and I don't know if Mark Han is on the call, but he actually hates it when I say this. I thought this test was much easier than the CISSP, so I think everybody could, not be afraid of it. You can enter it with a certain air of confidence based on, the experience that I know everybody has.
But don't let your guard down.
Okay, I think we kind of already covered what the CISA book club is. As far as the book club schedule, we're set up to do these every Friday at 11 Pacific time. So hopefully that can make it. I think what the biggest thing, the biggest benefit too of this is just kind of forcing people to commit, and we'll kind of come back to this too later. But I think for me, one of the biggest kind of steps forward to take was actually signing up for the test. The testing center that was closest to me was actually surprisingly pretty booked up, and it took me a while or I had to basically book the test out pretty far in advance. So that's probably my number one recommendation, is just to sign up for the test. So as far as what the CISA book club is and what it isn't, there's going to be a lot of reading. There's going to be practice tests you can take. The Peter Gregory book, which is on the slide there, that's on the right side of the screen, that upper picture, that's a picture of that Peter Gregory book. It's the 3rd edition. What's great about that book is, one, it's not very expensive, and two, it includes a CD, and on that CD there is an e-copy of the book in PDF format. So what you can do with that PDF is you can, save it to the hard drive in your laptop. So if you're ever stuck on a plane or something, you've got, some reading material you can go through. There's also a little testing engine on that too, which is helpful. So, you're going to want to take as many practice tests, as practical. And so you're going to have the practice test questions that are within that ISACA manual, which is that lower picture on the right side of the screen. You're going to have the test questions that are included in the Peter Gregory book. And then you're also going to have the a bunch of internet resources that I think there's links later in this slide deck that shows you some other testing engines that you can take. So all that stuff is good. It's good to, I think, also vary the source of the material you're looking at, because things get presented in a slightly different way, and I think that's very helpful. That Peter Gregory book, I mean, when you first look at it, I think it's like about 700 pages or something like that, but the last 200 pages of that are a audit framework, so that really isn't required reading as far as this book club goes, nor is it really required reading for the test. It's just basically kind of material. I think it's valuable, but it's material that you don't have to read as part of this thing. So subtract 200 pages from that book right off the bat, and so it's a little less intimidating, I think. That ISACA CISA review question book, I thought that thing was extremely helpful. From ISACA's website, you can either buy that book directly, or you can actually get a subscription to it. The subscription you'll get, for a limited time. That's going to be online. So if that's not going to do you much good if you don't have internet access on a plane or something, or if you just prefer it in a hard copy book. But that book, it's about 1,000 practice questions, and each question is in the format where it has, A, B, C, and D, and there will be one right answer, but it will also explain why the wrong answers are wrong, which I think is almost more helpful than, why the right answer is right. So definitely go through every question of that book at least once. Let's see. And as Steve mentioned, in the future, we'll hope to have some guest speakers to kind of talk on some other, kind of go more in depth on some of the subject matter. And here's kind of the basic schedule that we're going to run through. As you can see, we're weekly, and we're scheduled for 11 o'clock Pacific time. The order of the domains there, you'll see it says 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. The order that is showing up is basically the order of the way those books are. And fortunately, the Peter Gregory book and the ISACA practice test book both are in the same order of modules. So I think that's pretty helpful. But you can see how we basically devote 2 weeks to each module. And here's kind of that same thing with specific pages referenced. So that will help you, prepare for the next week's session. So for those of you who do not have an ISACA membership, or not really a membership, an account, I should say, that's kind of the first thing you should do is get an account set up with them, and then commit to the test. And when I signed up for it, I don't know if it's still the case today, but they had a deal where if you signed up for ISACA membership, they gave you a discounted test fee, and they also gave you discounts off the ISACA bookstore stuff. So the ISACA test book, instead of like $140 or whatever it was, $130 or something like that. And that the amount of the test fee was down quite significantly. I think it was like a $200 savings on the test fee. And the reason, obviously we're all doing this is because the PCI Council has basically implemented an audit requirement. And so for those of us who already had our CISSP, we now get to add the CISA to our repertoire. And then you can see the 5 domains which were shown on the previous slides.
Tremendous, Clark. Pay to play QSA. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. One thing, and this kind of goes back to, again, that recommendation about kind of signing up for the test right away. The ISACA is actually changing the weighting of the test somewhat. They announced that, I believe, last November, but that's going to take effect next June. And so basically that means the grading of the test is going to be weighted. I don't know that we have a whole lot of information on that. And as of this morning, that Peter Gregory book, that 3rd edition, was still the latest version of that. So I don't, my gut feeling is that that is not going to change a whole lot from the base material other than those percentage changes. And those percentage changes, you can see, are not super huge. But that's kind of another reason to sign up for that test, sooner rather than later. And if we get any more, ground-breaking information on this, we'll forward along as far as what the June changes are going to be. This stuff is pretty self-explanatory. For me, when I took that test, I actually took it in the end of last September. And the 4 hours, basically the first 2 hours of it, I basically spent them taking the actual test, going through every single question. And about the last hour and 50 minutes, I just basically went over each question again, just to make sure I wasn't, answering something I didn't want, answering it in a way I didn't want to. But I think the thing too is just to make sure when you're taking the test to read each question super carefully, because they will throw in a keyword that can kind of change the take on things. So the recommendation in that is when you're going through the test to read each question twice.
Hey, Clark, for the test, then can you circle back to questions you've already answered? Because I know every once in a while there's tests that you can't go back, but in this case, for this exam, you can go back if you want to change an answer.
Yeah, that's correct. And you can also, mark an answer to go back on. But I did mark it, but I actually went back over every single question.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I think the key, one of the key things on this slide is around test strategy. It's almost as important as understanding the material. And there is a time management element to it. So things like you don't want to get wrapped around the axle on one particular question, because you could burn up a lot of time. So have something in your head. I'm not going to spend more than a few minutes on each question, and I'm going to mark it for review and mark the best answer I can think of and move on, and then I'll come back to it. And then other things like this exam is 150 questions, but like the CISSP exam had a lot more questions and was a lot longer. So one strategy was to every 50 questions or something to get up and refocus and maybe get some water to drink, or that kind of thing. But and we can talk more about test strategy over the course of the book club, but it is very important to have one for yourself going in, and then just like anything, or try to stick to that strategy and not panic and move away from it.
Quick question, if I may. Is it only online, or are you able to have, my strategy requires generally pencil and paper. So I don't know if we, well, I use the one check, 2 check, 3 check method. And I don't, if it's strictly a linear, ask this and then move to the next, a little more challenging for me.
When you go in there in the testing center, I assume it's going to be the same for everybody. They basically make you kind of surrender any materials, and I think they gave you a couple pieces of paper and a writing pencil, but quite frankly, I don't think I ever even wrote anything down. If I wanted to mark something, I did, but I just kind of went over every question anyways. And I don't think of myself as a super fast on these things, because other people there seem to finish faster than me. I was just kind of slow and deliberate, and I kind of decided I was going to kill the whole 4 hours when I was in there, and I actually left about 10 minutes early. So I don't think this one is, I mean, for me anyways, I don't think this one was as much of a time crunch for me as the CISSP was. And then a couple other things I wanted to add on this thing. One thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was once you finish the test and you kind of click on the little button where you kind of commit to being finished, a little thing pops up, you know, that more or less kind of grades you. And that little test, that little window that pops up, the font on it was pretty small. And of course, they've got a bunch of red in there, and you think, uh-oh, things didn't go real well. But kind of in the middle of it, they kind of have the word pass hidden in there. And then what they don't let you do is they don't let you print anything. So you literally walk out of there without any proof of anything. And they basically say you're going to get an email in 10 days. So that was a little bit worrisome for me from somebody who doesn't, you know, from all of us in security who don't kind of inherently don't trust anything. But that's the way that testing works for the CISA.
Right. And typically, Greg, they will give you, in these kinds of tests, they'll give you either a piece of paper or a mini whiteboard with a marker. And some people use those to, before they even start the exam, they'll do like a brain dump of key concepts or equations or, you know, that kind of thing, just to kind of, so they don't have to kind of keep them in their head, or things that, you know, that they don't quite fully, you know, can't fully memorize. They'll hold it in their head long enough to get it out on a piece of paper before they start the exam. So,
and once you pass the exam, you can do your application for the actual CISA cert. And the good news is that application that you fill out, I think there's another $50 fee for the application process. But that application is surprisingly streamlined, which is was kind of a nice surprise. And once you do that, it took a few weeks to get it, not too long, but you know, it's nice to have that thing in your hot little hand. I believe a few days before I actually got it in the mail, I actually got an email where I got an, you know, like a PDF copy of my cert as well. See, any more questions about the test? All right.
Thank you.
We'll move over. Sherry,
I have one question about the test. Would you? Yeah, do have one question about the test. Would you just take it for us so we don't have to worry about it? Is that part of the service that we're providing here as the book club?
I'm sorry, Sherry, I couldn't hear you.
I have the same question.
Yeah, what I'm asking is part of the service of the book club that you'll take the exam for everyone so that they don't have to go take the exam.
Yeah, and I'll drink your celebratory beverage as well.
Oh, now wait, I don't share that. You had me until then. So on this next slide, and I'm guessing okay, here we go. Note taking. I did a class on Udemy, udemy.com, and they talked a lot about how you have, when you study, you have this book and you're coloring in it, and when you look back at your pages, all you have is highlight, and they say throw your highlighters away. And they give you these guidelines for taking notes, and I find that it really is helpful. So you underline things that are really important, double underline things that you want to go back and reread. You can put an asterisk by paragraphs you want to go back and reread. And when you're reading, you see some things that are like, man, that's a good question. I bet that's going to be on the exam. Just put a Q by it. And then you can use brackets if you're reading a whole paragraph and you find that much of what was in that paragraph is actually summarized in the same paragraph or somewhere on the page. Just bracket that and then circle any keywords that you see along the way. And I've tried this on my own. And if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see kind of what it looks like. So it's a shorthand, but you really can look at a page and say, you know, you can tell the difference between something that you want to go reread versus something that you think would be a good question versus something that you think is important. So it's really good to be able to do that. And another thing that they point out is that you should really pull back and read the whole page and look at it as a full page so you see the full concept versus just seeing an individual paragraph. And I'm finding also that that has been a very helpful learning for me, that it really does make a big difference. Clark, back to you.
Thanks,
Unless there are
Sherry.
any questions on that? Yeah.
So this kind of, the first assignment, this goes back to one of those earlier slides about kind of the reading schedule. So within the Peter Gregory book and the ISACA review question book, you can see the page assignments. The ISACA book, the pages 73 through 157, I think that will be easier to run through, even though that's a greater number of pages than the Peter Gregory book. In terms of, you know, how much time it takes, just because all it is really questions, and they seem to go pretty quickly. But you'll probably want to read, you know, in terms of the order that you want to do the reading first and then take the practice questions. And again, you know, kind of the earlier theme, I think that for me, the biggest point to make out of today is just to get signed up for that test. I don't think I can stress that enough, because it's going to help you in so many ways. It's going to make you commit to it. You know, there could be issues with everybody and their brother signing up for the CISA test because it's now a requirement. So I don't know how crowded those exam centers get. The exam center I went to was kind of a smaller facility. So, and they, you know, they did all kinds of testing there for nursing and probably just about every industry. So there weren't, I think there were only about 20 seats in that center I was at. So please look into that and get your exam scheduled right away after you get your CISA, I'm sorry, ISACA ID set up.
Right. And so, Clark, folks, if they sign up, they can, you can always change it, right? You can change the date.
Yes,
say something. So
yeah. I believe there was about a 48-hour lead time in order to change the date. Now, I'm kind of assuming that's universal, but that was true at the testing facility I went to. But please verify that for yourselves on whichever testing center is nearest you. Thanks for that reminder, Jerry.
And Jerry, when we sign up, is there an expense process? How do we go about putting this on our, I wasn't sure which code.
Okay,
for the actual ISACA just ID, there's not a sign up for that, but when you commit to the test, you have to pay for the test. And as we said earlier, at the time I signed up, they gave you a deal. It gave you a discounted bookstore costs and a discounted exam fee if you had bought the ISACA membership.
Right. So thanks, Clark. So Greg, for the folks at online, yes, you if you have room in your professional development budget, you can expense exam costs, exam fees for this, and that would just go against your professional development budget, is my understanding. And so, but there are folks that are outside of our organization that are participating in the book club. I have no idea if your organization's covered the exam costs, so there's a bit of a disclaimer there that you know, for folks that are not with online, you know, that I'm not sure what the process is, or if you have to cover it on your own or whatever. So I just wanted to make that clear.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. I probably should have taken that offline. I realized there are other folks here. My apologies, everyone.
No, it's all good. All good. We're all friends here.
Yeah, I think that Peter Gregory book, that thing's not very expensive. I think it's only like $40 or something like that. And then that that ISACA book is a little bit more expensive. I think it was like $130 or something like that. But those were basically the only two study resources that I went out and paid for. And as we mentioned earlier too, there's a lot of free testing stuff online there. There's, you know, a ton of YouTube videos for testing strategies and just you know, module lessons. So there's a plethora, because this test has been out a while, there's a plethora of information out there on this. And this next slide is basically talking about tips within domain 2. A lot of this, I think, aligns with some of the stuff we see in PCI and best practices in terms of, separation of duties, that kind of thing, and what kind of the traditional roles are for each one of those things with respect to SDLC, operations, data management, that kind of thing. One of the things too I can add here is it seems like every IT related test going back to the old MCSE days, there was always some question they threw in there about human safety, and whenever it came down to choosing between like data safety and human safety, they always think they're going to get you on that question, but I think we all know how that question is supposed to be answered without breaking any testing NDAs here. And here's an example of an exam question. From our this is probably a good example of one that would might be a little bit tougher if you are reading, if you're bringing too much of your experience into the question, where we're all kind of want to fix things and everything, but that's, where there will be a lot of choices that, between the choices, each choice will seem not a lot different than like A and C might seem pretty similar to you in this question, but you just need to make sure you understand the differences and make sure you read the question very carefully to see what ISACA is really chasing on these individual questions. And typically when you're taking, and you also see this in that ISACA test question book, a lot of times there will be, you can easily eliminate two of the questions, and so, or two of the answers, I should say, and then it will come down to the, there will be two answers that technically are right. You just need to choose the best answer that you think ISACA wants. And when you're using that ISACA book, what is helpful is that I'll take like a blank piece of paper and just cover up the answers as you're going through each individual question to make sure you're not cheating or accidentally seeing the answers, to keep yourself honest when you're going through the questions in that book. And also not to give people a false sense of confidence. I thought the questions in that book in general the wording of them was longer than what you see on the actual exam, and probably a little bit more difficult. So if you can get through that ISACA practice question book, with comfort, you should feel pretty good about your chances on the test. Oops. Sorry about that. And here are some additional references for practice questions that you can find online, and they're free. And I use some of those too in addition. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's good to kind of look at this stuff from different sources, because each one will kind of have a little bit different perspective. So I think that's very helpful. And again, our recurring theme here is to get that exam scheduled. And that is it as far as our slide deck goes. Do we have any questions?
One question I have is, are all of the questions on the exam multiple choice, or do you have any shorthand, longhand at all?
When I took it, and I don't know if I'm violating the NDA here, but all the questions were A, B, C, D, four choice, multiple choice.
Okay, so I think that's fairly standard. So
yeah, so no true false or no drag and drop or anything like that.
Not that I can remember. I'm kind of wondering. I'm kind of having second thoughts about that drag and drop, but I'm sorry, I just don't remember.
No worries.
Sherry, you want to add anything?
Not that I can think of. I do remember that on the CISSP we had drag and drop, so it's very possible that that's the one you're thinking about. But we could. But those are usually, I think, some of the easier ones for me anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
But no, I would. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I remember too.
Yeah. So I would just say that read it from a high level perspective, and look at what it's trying to say. You may just want to look through and kind of glance through the table of contents in the domain. Look at the headings in each one of the different sections in the domain and see kind of what they're talking about. We'll get into more specifics next week, but I would just say happy reading. It's a lot of reading.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know about for you, but for me, that stuff is pretty dry, and it's you could read some John Grisham book, and 80 pages will fly by in a heartbeat, whereas you'll be struggling. 10 pages go by, and you'll think, is this it's slow reading.
I recommend no-dos and coffee.
And don't do any more than 10 pages at once, or it's still slow. But that's part of the reason we're doing this, right? We can all commiserate in knowing that we're having a shared experience, and we have peer pressure, making sure we're all trying to get the reading done, or as done as it could be.
Right. I'm going to offer up as well. So internally at Online, we've set up a Slack channel for the CISA book club. So everyone internally will go ahead and invite you to that channel so that we can you can participate and have a dialogue in between meetings if needed, ask questions, that kind of thing. For those of you that are outside of Online Business Systems, our help desk has indicated that we can add you to that Slack channel. We would essentially, what we would do is we would take your email address and add them to the permissions list. So are there folks that would like for us to add you to that Slack channel so that you can be part of the dialogue? Okay, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so maybe on the safe side, what we'll go ahead and do is everyone that signed up for the book club, we'll just go ahead and add to the Slack channel. And then if you don't want to participate, just decline the invitation or whatever, but we'll go ahead and get that set up.
One more point I wanted to make on that CISA study practice questions book. As you're going through this and you are covering the answer with a piece of paper and you read the question and you think you know the answer and then you select the answer. And what happened to me was that was a stupid way to answer that because I didn't read the question very well. And that was, kind of going back to read the questions very carefully because there'll be a key word in there or two that will really target what CISA is after in the answer to the question. So that, I think, was very valuable learning for me when I was going through that practice book. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Jerry here, I'll add something. One thing that I think we kind of skipped over at the very beginning of the meeting because we're probably all so excited to get into this was we all know each other at Online. We know each other's voices and that kind of thing. But what we forgot to do, I think, is introduce ourselves for the folks that are coming in from outside of our organization. So we still have a few minutes if we wanted to do that, so that people can kind of get to understand who's talking and who's on the phone and that kind of thing.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start, Jerry. I'm Clark Dixon. I'm an InfoSec consultant at Online. I've been with Online since June of 2015. Took the CISA, as I mentioned, back in September, and primarily do PCI QSA assessments.
My name is Sherry Collis, and I've been doing PCI since about 2002, 2003. Been working with Steve since probably 2005 and Marcana when they came in to assess me, my company, and I've been doing PCI assessments. I went over to the dark side of the consulting world and doing assessments in 2007. I've sat for my CISA years and years ago. I think it was like 2006 or 2007. So it's been a long time since I've done it.
Great, thanks. Jerry Holcomb here. I've been with Online for over 13 years, but I've only been on the dark side, as Sherry says, for about 4 of those years. And I have a CISSP and PCI QSA. And that's driving the need to take the CISA exam for myself.
Steve Levinson, I'm the one who brings darkness to everybody, hence the dark side.
Yes.
Been in security for, well, IT and security years are like dog years. So, over 100 years of security, but 0 years thus far as a CISA. And while we as a consultancy don't really ever consider ourselves to be auditors, right? We're advisors, and hence most of the people in the practice are CISSPs. But a few folks have already came in the door with CISA certifications. But the driving factor for a bulk of us is the fact that in the PCI world, you need to have a second certification, both a general security certification as well as an auditing one. So we just figured that the CISA path would at least be most closely aligned with how we go about doing business. So I'm terribly excited about making the dark side even darker.
This is Greg. Hi, I'm a consultant with Online. Been doing PCI, learned PCI from Steve and Sherry starting in 2008. And as Steve said about this, we're getting it to keep our QSAs. I've actually studiously avoided getting it since 2004. But the Band-Aid's been pulled off, so here we go. And thank you very much, Clark and Sherry, for putting that. Was a great presentation. Really well done. Thank you.
How about any of our non-onliners on the call?
Hi, my name is Lori Naughton. I actually work for Target Corporation, so I'm one of those first outsiders. I've actually been involved in various compliance roles for probably 12 years now. I do have my CISSP. I've had it since 2011, so I come with a lot of that generalized policy knowledge, vulnerability, those sorts of things. But in my current role right now, I'm working in identity and access management, and essentially what my role is to one, build a better auditor, and two, make it so that our internal folks know what the rules are, and so that they can, essentially the outcome of what I do is to make it really easy for the auditors to pass us. So it's a very unique role, but it's an exciting one, and I never know what's going to hit my desk on a given day.
You'll do awesome.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess that's it.
I think everyone else is shy.
Okay. One other thing I didn't mention, and probably should, I think every one of these meetings for all the non-CIS, well, for the existing CISAs, it'll help, but for anyone else, I think we can use these as CPEs. So that will be helpful. You get a CPE per week just on attending our little sessions here.
That's great.
If that is all, I think we can conclude the call and give you back 16 minutes of your life.
Great. Well, thanks, Clark and Sherry, for the great presentation. It was good to get this going in a very positive note. I will get the recording of the session processed as quickly as possible and get them posted on our, I believe we post them somehow on our website, and I will send out a link to both of those things as quickly as I possibly can. And then I will also work with our help desk to get everyone added to the Slack channel that I talked about. So thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend and a great week, and happy reading, and we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
This is great. Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend.